So I got into robotics out of spite, purely out of spite.
I love spite businesses.
And the company I left shut down a year after I left.
You want an engineer?
I do not know how to program a robot.
This is turning people into morons.
The robotaxi movement has benefited from that human isolation.
The token burn is ridiculous.
Uber blew through their 2026 budget for tokens in 4 months.
The machine's going to make better decisions faster than humans can.
Dark factories have the light switched off because there's no requirement for human intervention.
This was always their end goal.
The pushback is strong because the messaging is wrong.
If all you're selling on is efficiency, that's not a great message.
Robots and humans can coexist and work together.
Good to see you, man. Thank you for hopping on. You've got two companies. One is doing automated driving, and the second is a robotics thing.
Yeah, so Poma Robotics is a robotics system integrator. We don't build the robots ourselves. So we buy the robot, build our own end-of-arm tooling, safety systems, material handling systems, custom software, logic controls.
You must be using AI within that.
So when you buy a robot, a robotic arm, you get the arm, some basic level of software, and a PC that enables you to control that arm. That's it. As an integrator, we have to build the remaining systems around that robot.
So how did you get into this?
So I got into it out of spite.
I love spite businesses.
This is purely out of spite. My job was to oversee a robotic system. I realized, wow, like this is what the future is going to be. I had this instant switch that went on in my head going, I want to run that company. That was run by this guy who was probably in his late 60s, looking to retire. That's not a huge corporation, but they were turning over $1.5 million per year. Their customers were Google and DHL, and they were doing big projects, but as a company they weren't really at the rate that you think they would grow. So I said I would like to raise some money and I'd like to execute from the business. I have the energy and the passion and the knowledge to run the company. Right? I made him an offer. Let's just say around 750 to $1 million, something like that. Unfortunately, the guy who was running the company valued the business at over £10 million. Right? In his head, he thought the business was worth $10 million. And the only reason was DHL tried to buy his company 5 years before I'd made an offer. And then I thought to myself, why don't I start myself? I spent another 3 months building up my supply chain, sales process, my website, and just like plowing out email, call. And I said to them, look, I'm a new company. I'm here. If you hear about anything, give me a shot. And I landed a project, one project. That's what I got out of probably 200, 300 leads. I went to the customer. I said, you're my first customer. I have no money. Project value is around 35,000. Do you mind paying me up front? 70%. Said, okay, you're the cheapest quote you gave me. Why not? I had no credit history. So like no suppliers would give me credit. So I had to buy a lot of stuff up front. I mean, imagine buying literally 15 bolts online because you think to yourself, that's the only thing I can afford. That's all I need for this one project is like 15 M10 bolts. That's what I did. And I would get a little Tupperware and put the bolts in and go, right, okay, that's my treasure. I don't want to lose that. And I went to my mate who had just bought his house. He had a double car garage. And I said, look, I want that garage for the next 2 months, right? I don't know how much I'm going to pay you. You're my mate. I'm going to use your garage. And sure enough, he gave me his garage. And then it just kind of rolled from there. And the company I left shut down a year after I left.
And so you had no history in robotics. You knew nothing about it. You weren't educated in that. You weren't an engineer.
I do not know how to program a robot. The key to a good system integration business is experience, right? Because you need to be able to visualize a whole robotic system in a space that has no automation. Like, how does the guy pick up that and how does he place it? What is he doing in between? How much distance is he traveling? What weight is it? If it's a dangerous task like an injection molding, how often does the machine break down? It's that visualization at day one is so important. And which is why a lot of new robotics startups, especially in the US, right, companies who claim the humanoids and the no-code robotics and AI-driven robotics, at the end of the day, those are great solutions, but to deploy them at an actual facility takes so much trial and error because you are building off-the-shelf systems, right, that you're attempting to squeeze into a space that has had no automation for decades. The only exception is Ocado. So Ocado decided we need to automate all our grocery picking, grocery sorting. So they built a warehouse and they introduced automation from day one. Burned through a lot of capital to just get that concept working of grocery picking and sorting. Had they gone to an Asda and said, do you think you can do this for us? Asda would turn around and say no, because our warehouses are not built for automation. They're built for manual, efficient, labor-intensive tasks.
Here was my assumption, that you were going to say, yeah, I use AI to design everything. But actually what you're telling me is this is a very human-centric thing.
Yes. At the system integration level, we do not use a lot of AI for designing systems. At the deployment level, we do. So we have AI-powered camera systems that will teach a robot to pick from a certain location. Or I can inspect a freshly made part and tell the robot this is a reject or this is a pass. We're not in the business of robotics R&D. We're in the business of deploying commercialized solutions. I get approached by a lot of companies who are building robots that can be programmed through just voice and camera systems and physical AI powered systems and optimized cycle time. This amazing tech, right? And I have refused because I don't have the time and the budget. We have participated in R&D programs, but mostly grant funded, not customer funded.
Yeah, the big promise of AI stuff falls away quite quickly when you really start digging under the hood a little, right?
Yeah.
My guess is that these guys are probably trying to sell you the equivalent of the robot hoovers that just keep banging into the wall. And they figure out your room not by mapping it, but by hitting against walls and obstacles until the whole thing's clear, which is not the most efficient.
Yeah. It's difficult to say where physical AI will go into. I mean, a lot of companies are claiming physical AI is the future, but like I can't prompt a ChatGPT model or a Claude model to say, give me a full fabrication drawing for a gripper that can hold a 20 kilo payload. That will still require a human intervention. Where AI can help, with a lot of our robotic systems run custom Python codes. It has helped us generate those codes based on the robot's kinematics with a single prompt. A lot of my documentation is automated. I used to sit and write these things. Now we just upload all the content and we ask the AI models to generate those reports for us. So there are practical AI tasks that we do undertake in the business, not at the deployment level for a physical system in a factory yet. Where I do see some AI making a fundamental difference is around sustainability. There will be tasks in a factory that you will never be able to automate. Typically in a factory, you can automate around 70% of processes.
I think it's probably highly reassuring for people, but probably because of the combination of dexterity and vision and problem solving that's required and the mobility and all of those things. Is there anywhere that is a fully automated?
Dark factories is the term that's used for fully automated factories that have the light switched off because there's no requirement for human intervention. Like it's just stuff going in and then coming out of it is like the finished product. There are really good examples of dark factories in China, mostly not in the automotive sector, in the electronics sector. So a lot of phone companies, they have nailed the concept of dark factories because the only way they were able to achieve level of cost per unit design that the automotive sector achieved decades ago was they automated everything from day one. The first thing a lot of companies target when they want to be green is packaging. If they make a physical product, the packaging always matters. Pick up a router today. It comes in a carton that's got multiple folds inside and out, and it's put into this very sleek, thin packaging material that can be dropped through your letterbox because it saves money on shipping. The post office can deliver it for you. The problem is that takes even more time at a warehouse to package. When people used to get a box and dump stuff in and tape it, that might have taken like 10 seconds. I have not seen to date a robotic system that can address complex, sustainable, plastic-free packaging. And even then, it may achieve what it does, but it'll still be slower than a human.
The hype is that these things are more dexterous, they're faster, they never get tired, they don't need bathroom breaks. And
the 16-hour video stream that Figure AI did, right? But what was the actual task the robot was doing? Literally taking packages, it was flipping it and placing it onto a table that had a barcode scanner. So the task in hand, I would argue, you probably didn't need a humanoid robot to do that. You probably could have got away with a relatively smart half humanoid robot or maybe two robotic arms with one vision system to do the exact same task.
I never understood why you'd make it humanoid shaped. This is part of what red flags the whole thing of being hypey. And especially where they parade this one out and it's got boobs. I don't know if you saw one of these recently. They got out on
yeah.
stage and it's got a very obvious feminine shape. I'm like, Jesus, this was always their end goal. They just wanted to build the girlfriend robot, right?
Yeah,
That was it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. You don't need those shapes, and a good argument to that is why bother having a nicely designed house? Couldn't live in a container. It'll look ugly as shit, but it's still functional, right? No, you could stack four containers together and make a house out of it. Why go through the effort of making a house that looks good? It's aesthetics. It's the same concept for everything that is human facing. It was because a lot of these initial deployments will almost always require a human to work alongside a robot. And if they can get a physical presence of a human figure, they are more accepting of that tech. That forms the basis of a lot of humanoid designs. Humanoid, figure AI, Unitary, it's all built around that human shaped figure, because the goal is that there has to be some level of acceptance. Like stuff we do has no aesthetics, but it has a functional task. Like, it looks cool, but it's ugly as fuck. Like,
Yeah. Oddly, I'd want it as far away from human as possible because I don't want it encroaching on our space.
imagine my job was to feed a machine the camshaft that is heavy. It goes through the treatment process. Then I have to lift it back out. And then I have to do this other task, which is basically put a sealant on it. Do you not think that I'd be quite happy that a robot is doing that dirty bit and I'm only having to kind of do the sealing bit? And I just make sure the robot's not broken down or making an error. Someone who works in a factory probably accept that because he's getting paid the same. He's not doing backbreaking work anymore. He's more relaxed. He's not tired. He doesn't have to do the physio. So there's an argument there that robots and humans can coexist and work together for certain tasks. Berry picking robots is picking up. Robots that are on wheels. Some are humanoids, some are arms. It's not a heavy thing to pick berries, but imagine doing that for 8 hours a day in the sunshine, right? In a humid greenhouse. Do you think I'd like to package those berries at another place than picking those berries? I'd say the packaging is better. So there is this concept of what they call dirty, dangerous, and tiresome tasks robots need to take over. As a human, for us to accept some of these tech, it has to look aesthetic to us. You know, why does a Roomba look the way it does? Why is it nice and sleek and black? It's in your house.
I feel that there's quite a backlash going on at the moment with AI.
At least for the physical AI space sector that I'm in, the pushback is strong because the messaging is wrong. The messaging is that, yes, we can automate a lot of processes that you're doing that are dirty, dangerous, and tiresome, but these systems are still going to require manual intervention. They're still going to require upskilling of your existing labor force to support these robots. To me, a utopian world in that sector means robots equal efficiency, efficiency equals higher margins. Let's pay the workers what they deserve. Right, that's utopian society. Why not pay your employees a bonus? And this is where absolutely important unionization plays a major role in this, right? And I think the unions get it wrong as well. So as a union entity, you need to push employers up wages based on the upskilling that's required for those employees to manage the systems. We did a project a few years ago. We had trained 4 operators who were basically their only job in the past was to pick parts, place it into a tray. They did that for 5-6 years at just above minimum wage. We went in and we installed the robotic system. We trained these operators and upskilled them to now recover robots from errors, programming basic setups, calibration activities, looking out for signals and alarms. Even if it was a fully automated system, we still had to provide that training. After we left, 2 months later, an Aldi opened up nearby. Guess who left to go and work for Aldi? The 4 operators, because they were able to get a higher wage stocking shelves in Aldi than working in this factory, even with the skills that they had, because they demanded a pay rise, they didn't get it. The natural thing is, well, Aldi's paying me a lot more, so that messaging has to be right from day one, and it's not been. Universities and academic are to blame because they are so focused research and development and securing funding for that research, and the only way to do that is to sell this idea of a utopian society to funders is the only way they can operate. So the messaging has been absolutely wrong by public institutions. They need to be better at that.
The other thing you do, which is automated vehicles, and they got the messaging quite good, apart from with Uber drivers, obviously.
Yeah.
But as far as the public's concerned, they leaned heavily on safety. If you're trying to get people to accept new technology, that one's far easier to understand, that a machine's going to make better decisions faster than humans can. Whereas if all you're selling on is efficiency and, hey, the factory owner's going to make a lot more money and be
Yeah.
able to keep it, and then you can put people out of work, that's not a great message.
One of the biggest things, the selling point of robotaxis is a driver-passenger interaction. That's a part of me feels the robotaxi movement has benefited from an isolation that we had anyway. We were stuck on our phones. You know, we as a society have already isolated ourselves from reality even before the robotaxi movement. So for us to jump into a driverless taxi that avoids any anxiety-driven communication with a cab driver who has a sausage roll for breakfast, that relates to me because I feel safe because I'm isolated from the anxiety that I would have to normally go through. And as the population has gone younger, they prefer that because I was isolated anyway because I was hooked on Instagram and Facebook, and social media has isolated me from society anyway. So might as well do that when I'm going to work in a driverless cab. You know, so a lot of the robotaxi movement has benefited from that human isolation that existed.
Of course, we, being slightly older, Terry, are going to argue, and especially people who like to sit around drinking and talking bollocks, that is the very thing that's caused so many problems within society, and it should be everything we're fighting against.
Yes. And for me, AI is definitely the future. It's unavoidable. You're going to have a lot more data centers, a lot more raw data. You're going to have to work with partners through globally to make these AI models work. And we are already living in a world that has limited resources. That will be what defines the future of AI, not software engineering right now, unless they find some way of efficiently running with like the lowest watt per token, for example. It's not going to nail it.
And we're seeing this over and over again, and it's what everybody's talking about. If we can't fix fusion, for example, this isn't going to play out well. I mean, the token burn, even just doing fairly pedestrian tasks, is ridiculous.
It's insane. Look at the two companies that are using AI now effectively. So Uber blew through their 2026 budget for tokens in 4 months. Microsoft shut down their cloud program because it burned through like a year's worth of budget in 2-3 months. Right. So that token element of it is so important because it is energy demanding. And the more lazier as a society we get, the more tokens we're going to use. These things will get better. They'll get more intelligent and we'll have more context. I think it was the GitHub CEO was talking about deploying an open flow model. He had all the cameras in his house rigged to an AI agent, and he was talking about something like the camera detected that I was dehydrated and it forced me to go and drink water. A bit creepy, I get it, but I do understand why they would do it. But I can totally see something like working at a hospital and a nurse being able to manage 2 or 3 different wards at the same time and prioritizing where she needs to go. It will take time to understand how these things work. Until then, just have to be forgiving.
So you're fully bullish, and I agree with you, by the way, on all that stuff. If you can have wearables, and of course that's where health tech is going. For example, the blood sugar thing's massive.
Yeah.
And once you can get all that kind of stuff done, outcomes will be so much better for everybody. And tech usually has better outcomes, long-term, net positives.
Yeah.
So you're using this every day on a personal level?
Yeah, I do. I'm not using it to monitor my hydration levels. That's definitely not the case. At least for Halo, we have been able to accelerate our product development and our coding because of AI. We are not writing code from scratch. The prompt, the AI model builds our codes for us. We've been able to iterate because of AI within the business. We have a simulation platform here for Halo. We use an open source model to simulate in, and it's the only way without having to deploy a car on the road to test if our systems are working.
And so you can run endless simulations. And
I can run endless simulations.
When you think you've got the solution, then you can put it out live.
Then I can put it out live or test it on the road correctly. That means I don't have to deploy a car on road. My engineers don't have to be on road just to collect data. And they're able to define scenarios and driving environments, rain, potholes, whatever, to see if it's going to react to the way a human would react in a simulated environment. I'm not saying it's going to be 100% working on the car, but you're probably 50-60% there. You know,
well, that was going to be my next question. How accurate are you finding it?
It's not accurate at all. You're 50 because simulated environments are perfect worlds. You know, you can't just deploy a simulated model on road without, doing some level of training on it. So the goal for physical AI companies is to get their foundation models well trained. And that forms the basis of deployments in the future.
Is there a huge sense of responsibility? I would not want to be the CEO of Waymo with the idea that these things are out in the wild and could possibly run over a dog or even worse, right? How much of that is a factor in your thinking?
It is a factor, but we don't need it right now because we're still in this driver's seat. We're still monitoring the vehicle. We still take overs.
I was speaking to a teacher the other day. She's not comfortable at all. She's saying this is turning people into morons. I don't like it. You know, when we met, we were like, yes, mate, this is the way forward. I think I'm slowly starting to pull back a little bit, but there's the cycle of amazement, and then you feel the limits of these things. And then I think what will emerge, we'll start to see the actual use cases beyond all of the sort of nonsense. And it will probably take some kind of breakthrough, like curing cancer or some huge energy breakthrough, and people will go, oh, okay, this is undeniably a force for good now, rather than just bastard corporations finding new ways to surveil us, nick our data, and, you know, leave us jobless, which I think is a very real fear at the moment.
It is. And I can't comment on sectors that are not in my domain expertise. Teaching, law, creative industries, music, I don't have enough of a market awareness and knowledge to pass judgment on how AI would influence those industries. And in my sector, AI does play a fundamental role, but it requires a lot more maturity for me to adopt it at scale. At least in the manufacturing side, in the driverless side, AI will play a fundamental factor, but we are years away from artificial general intelligence. So there is a perception in the AI community that AGI will form the basis for how AI is deployed at scale.
And so you're not particularly concerned that robotic / AI deployment across manufacturing is necessarily going to mean job loss. It's probably going to mean a net positive for the whole industry.
It's a question of reskilling and upskilling. So if companies don't have a reskill and upskilling strategy, they are bound to fail if they are looking to deploy physical AI models into their factories and spaces.
It's interesting. And I guess to see the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution, what we would have to have is this rebuilding from the ground up. That's been a really interesting sort of takeaway for me, is that integration is way, way harder than is hinted, and that you'd have to see effectively total rebuilds and dark factories, as you called them.
Correct,
for this to actually be meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, I mean, that's a lot of capital and that's a lot of time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's going to take some time.
Terry, that was really good, really interesting. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, sure.